Hunting the Shadows. Good evening, folks. Come on in. This is going to be a special edition tonight of Hunting the Shadows. This is our Halloween edition tonight, and we're going to have some fun. We're going to tell some scary stories. This is going to be our version of the campfire. Okay, tonight. I think you'll enjoy it, and you'll be entertained for the next hour or so. So pull up a tombstone and gather here in the grotto with me as we celebrate the season of the witch, Halloween. Samhain. Halloween night is so damp and so chill, a night of black evil, a night of cold ill. It's dark in the evening, then darker still on Halloween night. Halloween night, definitely the Celtic New Year. We're going to get on our comments here and see who we got all checking in tonight before we get started. Hello, Shiro. And there's Patriotic Gang and Cryptidville. Good to have you. And Scott and Midwest Night Watcher, my good friend Gerald. How you doing tonight, sir? We're going to give them a few minutes to gather around the campfire here before we start the storytelling, okay? I hope you're going to enjoy tonight. We got some good ones lined up for you, okay? Get you in the Halloween mood. Everybody, I don't care who you are, how much you made tonight, everybody loves a good scary story, okay? Look how much the horror movie industry depends upon that very thing, okay? Definitely. All right, sounds good. Patriotic Youngsters got a cold, rainy night there. Perfect night for this kind of stories, definitely. Absolutely. We're going to get into some horror and mystery, murder and revenge stuff here. So, and who's going to help us with that? The Master Poe will definitely helping us get in the mood for that. Judy Wheeler, all right. Good to have you here. Juno, my friend. And Scott, yes, I didn't mention you before. Sweet Pea, and we're getting them lined up here, okay? We're ready for it. There's a little something just to get started with here. Stories are very important things, you know. Stories used to be the only way we kept hello there, how you doing? We used to keep our history that way, you know, before it was ever written down. It was told and passed along in stories. So the storyteller is very important. And there's a little something I wrote about the storyteller several years ago. Let me awaken the memory of the days of old, when time was free and the sun was gold, and the nights were dark, the tales that were told by the light of the fire when the night winds grew cold. Then late in midnight's lonely hour, when the face of the moon is pale, gather closer to the fire and listen well. Hold fast to the words and break not their spell, for there are legends left to speak of and stories still to tell. We're going to get into some very interesting stories here tonight, definitely. So get ready, get you some popcorn, whatever you want to do. And hello, Ann. Good to have you here, my dear. And the first story I've got coming up actually comes from the Appalachian Mountains. Okay, it's a very old story, and it's kind of comical, but it's also got its kind of scary part too. This won't scare you too bad, though, I don't think. But this is the story of the Hairy Man. Now, a long time ago, in the Appalachian Mountains, there lived this young boy named Wiley. Now, Wiley was really smart, very smart boy, but his mother was smarter. Okay. So one day, Wiley turned to his mom and said, "I got to go down to the swamp and cut some cane and make a chicken roost." And Wiley's mama said, "Well, Wiley, now you take the dogs with you, because if you run into that hairy man, the dogs will scare him off." So Wiley rounded up all his dogs, tied them all up with one rope, went on down to the swamp feeling fine. He got down to the swamp and he found a big old tree, tied the dogs up to a tree, and he went on down further and a little bit further in the swamp, started cutting him some cane. Had him a big pile of cane, pretty well fixed up. When he looked up and all of a sudden, there was the hairy man coming right for him. Now the hairy man was hairy. Okay, that's why they call him the hairy man. And he was big, and I mean big, and he was mean. He had sharp, pointed teeth sticking out of his mouth with green moss growing on them. The hairy man was not a man to be trifled with. He didn't smell good either. Ooh. So the hairy man went after Wiley. Wiley looked around, found the biggest tree he could find, and he climbed up that tree because he knew the hairy man couldn't climb a tree. And sure enough, he got up the top of that tree, looked down, there was the hairy man standing at the bottom of the tree. And he started shaking that tree like you'd shake a possum or a raccoon out, And Wiley said, "Oh, no, man, you going to shake me out of here." The hairy man said, "Well, that's what I plan on doing, Wiley. Because I'm going to shake you out of this tree and then I'm going to eat you. And I got to go on my way because I got things to do." And Wiley said, "Oh, no, hairy man, you wouldn't do that. That's mighty mean." "Well, I'm a mighty mean man. Now come on down here, let me eat you up. I got to go." Wiley said, "Oh, no, you wouldn't do that now, would you, hairy man? That's an awful bad thing to do to eat me." Said, "I hear you was better than that. I heard you was the best conjure man in the whole county." "That's right, Wiley. I am the best." And Wiley said, "Well, if that's true, hairy man, could you turn yourself into a giraffe?" And the hairy man said, "Well, that's what I do best there, Wiley." And he turned around 3 times and he turned into a big old long-necked giraffe. Well, Wiley said, "Oh," he was holding on to the tree. And he said, "Well, that's good. That's good, hairy man. But I bet you can't change yourself into a possum." Well, he turned around 3 times and bam, he was a little old possum. Wiley climbed down out of the tree. He grabbed that possum. He put that possum in the sack. He ran down to the swamp, tied that sack up, threw it in the water, went back to get his cane, feeling fine. He was walking along, doing all right, when he looked up, and oh, no, here come the hairy man coming after him again. Well, he turned around, found another big tree, climbed all the way up to the top, right next to a little bird nest. And the hairy man was down there looking at him again. And Wiley said, "Hairy man, how'd you get out of that sack?" And the hairy man said, "Oh, that was easy, Wiley. I just turned myself into the wind and blew myself away." "Now come on down out of that tree. I got to eat you." Hairy man said, "Oh," he said, "Hairy man, don't do that. That's bad." And he said, "Why?" He said, you wouldn't do that. Look, I bet you couldn't make this little bird nest disappear. You couldn't do that, I know." He said, "That's easy. Bird nest disappear." And all of a sudden, that little bird nest was gone. Well, Wiley had an idea. They didn't call him Wiley for nothing. He was a wily guy. he had a rope tying his pants up, and he got an idea. He said, "Harry man, I hear that if you are the best countryman, you can make this rope around my waist disappear. My mama conjured this rope, and I bet you can't do it." He said, "That's easy, Wiley. All the rope in this countryside disappear." And sure enough, bam, every rope in the countryside disappeared, including the rope around his pants. He had to hold his pants up with one hand and hold on to the tree with the other. But Wiley knew the rope was gone off of them dogs. And he whistled, and the dogs come running, and he chased the hairy man all the way down into the swamp. Wiley got the dogs and went home feeling fine. He told his mama what happened when he got home. His mama said, "Well, that's good, Wiley. You did real good, but he's liable to come back. Now, you do what I tell you to do. First, I want you to go out in the back, and you get me a little baby pig and bring it in the house." So Wiley went out and back and got a little baby pig and gave it to his mama. And his mama took the baby pig and put it in Wiley's bed, covered it up. She said, "Now, Wiley, you get in the closet with the dogs, and don't you open that door till I tell you to, okay?" Wiley said, "Yes, ma'am," because he's a smart boy. He listened to his mama. So night fell. The wind began to blow. And all of a sudden, they heard something walking across the top of the roof. And he jumped down on the porch and knocked on the door. And Wiley's mom said, "Who is it?" "It's me, the hairy man. I come to get your young'un. Now open this door and let me in him." And she said, "Oh, that's mighty mean, hairy man. You wouldn't do nothing like that." "Well, I'm a mighty mean man. Now, you open this door, I'll tear off the lock, and I'll come in there and get that boy, because I got to eat him. I got to get on my way." And she said, "Oh, hairy man, if I let you in, will you promise you'll never come back and bother us again?" "I promise I'll never come back. Now open the door." So Wiley's mama opened the door. The hairy man went right in Wiley's room, reached into bed, pulled out, "It's just a pig." She hollered, "Wiley!" He opened the door and let them dogs out, and they chased that hairy man clear out of the county. She said, "You did real good, Wiley. You did what I told you to do." He said, "Well, he won't be back, will he, Mama?" Said, "No, we fooled him 3 times. He won't never be back to bother us again." And you know what? He never did bother those people ever again. And that's the story of the hairy man. I wonder if he was related to Bigfoot. I believe they were distant cousins, definitely. So anyway, moving right along, since we're in the old folk tales and stuff, the next one I've got coming up here, I hope you like. It's one of my favorites. When I was a kid, I mean very, very little, my grandmother used to tell me this story. It's a story poem. I love poems that tell a story. You know, that's kind of the icing on the cake, so to speak. And she would tell me this story, and I would beg her to tell me this poem. So I went and I learned it myself years later. It was a very famous poem by a man named James Whitcomb Riley. And whenever I think about this poem, I think about my grandmother, definitely, and it brings back a lot of memories. Little Orphan Annie. Little Orphan Annie's come to our house to stay, to wash the cups and saucers up, and brush the crumbs away, and shoo the chickens off the porch, and dust the hearth and sweep, and bake the bed and make the beds, and earn her board and keep. And all us other children, when the supper things is done, we sat around the kitchen fire, and had the mostest fun, a-listening to the witch tales that Annie tells about, and the goblins that get you if you don't watch out. And once there was a little boy who wouldn't say his prayers, and when he went to bed at night, away upstairs, his mammy heard him holler and his daddy heard him bawl, but when they took the covers down, he wasn't there at all. They searched him in the cubby hole, the chimney flue and press, behind the doors, under the bed, and everywheres, I guess. But all they ever found was just his trousers and roundabout. And the goblins will get you too, if you don't watch out. And once there was a little girl who'd always laugh and grin. She made fun of everyone, of all her blood and kin. And once when there was company and old folks was there, she mocked them and she shocked them. And she said she didn't care. And just as she kicked her heels and turned to run and hide, there was two great big black things standing by her side, and they snatched her up through the ceiling, for she knowed what she's about, and the goblins will get you too if you don't watch out. And little Orphan Annie says that when the blaze is blue, and the lamp wick sputters, and the wind goes ooh, and you hear the crickets quit, and the moon is gray, and lightning bugs and dew is all squenched away, then you'd better mind your parents and your teachers fond and dear, and cherish them that loves you, and dry the orphan's tear, and help the poor and needy ones that clusters all about. Well, the goblins will get you too if you don't watch out. That's what we call a jump story. There's always a little jump at the end there for you just to keep you awake. Okay, definitely. That's one of my all-time favorites. Let's see what we got. Some reaction going on here. Okay. Just going to watch the screen. Okay. Thank you. Put me on the big screen there. You'll enjoy it better that way. It's better than looking at a little screen. They make you go blind after a while. My next story up tonight is one of my favorites. It's another jump story. Okay. I'm going to warn you ahead of time, but it's not going to help you. Okay. But this is the story of Old Man Danica. Okay. This is a very interesting story. Imagine a little farming community with miles and miles of cornfields, a nice, pleasant, peaceful kind of existence. Imagine such a life, and then imagine it all going haywire on Halloween night when terror stalks the town as it becomes the world of Old Man Danica. Now, in Corydon, Indiana, nobody went up the hill to Old Man Danica's house alone on Halloween. They took friends. That night, Paul and Lori Littleton went up the hill to Old Man Danica's house. Old Man Danica had a 2-story farmhouse, and when they got there, way off in the distance, they could see the house, and there were jack-o'-lanterns in every windows. Old Man Danica had carved jack-o'-lantern faces with weird eyes and crazy smiles on them. But that was far off. They were still stuck in the middle of the cornfield. And they were going through the cornfield, and here and there, everywhere out in the cornfield was scarecrows. And they knew that one of those scarecrows was going to be Old Man Danica. They started going through the cornfield, slowly towards Old Man Danica's house. Paul and Lori Littleton. Lori stopped for just a moment. She stopped next to a scarecrow. She thought she felt it move. The wind was blowing through the corn. The leaves were rustling. It was a moonlit night. They could hear the wind whispering in among the stalks. Paul, he was looking at Lori. He stopped next to the scarecrow. He felt like it was reaching out for him. He felt like it was going to grab him. He slowly raised his eyes up. He looked up at the scarecrow. Happy Halloween was Old Man Danica. They ran as fast as they could to the house. Miss Danica came out on the porch. Come here, Paul. Come here, Lori. He goes crazy on Halloween. Come on in. Get you a piece of the dark fudge. It made it all worthwhile, almost. Later that night, Old Man Danica came in the house. He had straw sticking out of his sleeves and out of his collar and all that. He said, I'm sick and tired of being just a scarecrow in a cornfield. I want to go down to the town. I want to scare everybody to death. That's why I said, you'll not do such a thing, Clem. You'll stay here on the farm. You'll work in the print shop, and that's all. You'll make you a scarecrow on Halloween, but that's it. You're not going down to the town. She kept a tight rein on Danica. But she took sick and died in December. January rolled around. Danica was sitting out on the liar's bench. No matter how cold it get, he would sit out there drinking his hot coffee. He was sitting out there, and some of the men sat down, and Danica's sitting there thinking, there's nothing holding me back now. Nothing holding me back. And one of the men said, well, he did the printing for the newspaper, and he said, Danica, what's the headline for tomorrow? He said, y'all coming out of my place, Halloween. Bring your kids. Tell everybody. He said, well, Danica, that's Halloween. That's October. This is January. And it got so that nobody would sit out on the liar's bench when old man Danica was out there because all he talked about was Halloween. Old man Danica loved Halloween too well. Spring turned into summer, and summer turned back into fall. Paul was going by the liar's bench that afternoon, and Danica stood up and said, come here, Paul. Come here, Paul. And he got a big pumpkin, hollowed out pumpkin head, and he put it on. And he said, here's a Kodak. Take a picture of me. Hold on a minute, let me get the sign up. And he held a sign up, and he said, Scarecrow Danica dead. Take the picture, Paul. Take the picture. Paul took a picture. He didn't bother taking the pumpkin and all. He said, let me see it. Oh, yeah, that's good. Come out to my place, Halloween. Tell your folks, bring everybody. What? That Halloween, Paul and all the rest of the kids in the town with their folks, they all went up to Danica's house to see what he had planned. They started going through the cornfield and going towards old Danica's house. They got to the cornfield with all the scarecrows. They kept waiting for one of them to move or do something, but nothing happened. They got to old man Danica's house. One of the men walked up, knocked on the door. Danica, it's Halloween. All of a sudden, the place was on fire. All the jack-o'-lanterns that were lit in every window of the house, they were melting like wax. Everybody had to get back. Some little kid in the back of the crowd fell over a tombstone. Everybody looked, and it was a tombstone, and it said, Scarecrow Danica. The fire chief got some of the men together and said, come on, dig this place, dig this grave up. We got to find out. They dug the grave up, and they got to a casket. And some of the men, they started getting the casket up out of the ground. They got it up out of the ground. And the fire chief said, would you get the people back? Would you get the kids back? And he opened up the casket. And there lay Scarecrow Danica. A pumpkin, a hollowed out pumpkin on his head with weird eyes and a crazy smile. He was laying there with straw on him. The fire chief picked his arm up. Hey, wait a minute, it's just a scarecrow. Said, you men stay here. When that fire goes out, you go through the ashes of the house and you look for Danica's body. They found nothing. Nobody knew whether old man Danica was alive or dead. Halloween rolled around next year. Nobody went up to old man Danica's house. There was no house left. Paul was going to school, and he said, look at the jack-o'-lanterns everywhere. Some of them had weird eyes and crazy smiles. But it couldn't be that, because Danica died in the fire, or did he? That Halloween, nobody went out alone. People went out in groups. The kids kept together, but Susie, she decided to run down the alleyway. She's going to run down the alleyway and come up behind the group and scare everybody. She was running down the alleyway and she got tired for a minute. She had to stop and catch her breath. She was leaning up against a lamppost. And all of a sudden, she felt like that lamppost moved. She felt like it was reaching out for her. She slowly looked up. Happy Halloween! It was old man Danica. Somebody said, where? Somebody saw him disappearing down the alleyway. When you go out on Halloween, whatever you do for safety's sake, don't go out alone. Take people with you. And if you should stop next to a lamppost or a sign or whatever, or even a scarecrow that's put up for decorations, be careful. It might not be what it really is. You may look up and see that it's Happy Halloween! It's old man Danica. He's alive. Oh, yes, he is. And that's the story of old man Danica. That's a good jump story. I always like it. Keeps the kids awake, too. Definitely. All right, we're going to turn a little more serious now. One of my favorites in childhood was a writer that was a favorite of mine was Robert E. Howard. And you might know him. He's the creator of Conan the Barbarian. by the way, which is one of his good characters. But another character that he had, which was my favorite, was Solomon Kane. Now, Solomon Kane was sort of like the first superhero kind of a guy. I mean, he was an adventurer and he was a swashbuckler like. He was a very interesting guy. But what I liked so much about Solomon Kane's stories, they always had a supernatural flavor to them. And that's why I'm going to tell you the story tonight of Solomon Kane's Homecoming. I hope you like it. The white gulls wheeled above the cliffs. The air was slashed with foam. The long tides moaned along the strand when Solomon Kane came home. He walked in silence, strange and dazed, through the little Devon town. His gaze, like a ghost come back to life, roamed up the streets and down. The people followed wonderingly to mark his spectral stare, and in the tavern silently they thronged about him there. He heard as a man hears in a dream the worn old rafters creak, and Solomon lifted his drinking jack and spoke as a ghost might speak. There sat Sir Richard Grenville once, in smoke and flame we passed, and we were 1 to 53, but we gave them blast for blast. From crimson dawn till crimson dawn, we held the Duns at bay. The dead lay littered on our decks, our masts were shot away. We beat them back with broken blades till crimson ran the tide. Death thundered in the cannon smoke when Richard Grenville died. We should have blown her hull apart and sunk beneath the main. People saw on his wrist the scars from the wrecks of Spain. Where's Bess? Said Solomon Kane. Woe that I caused her tears. In the quiet churchyard by the sea, she has slept these 7 years. The sea wind moaned at the window pane, and Solomon bowed his head. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Affairs fade, he said. His eyes were mystical deep pools that drowned unearthly things, and Solomon lifted up his head and spoke of his wanderings. My eyes have looked on sorcery in the dark and naked lands. Horror is born of the jungle gloom, and death on the pathless sands. And I have known a deathless queen in a city as old as death, where towering pyramids of skulls her glory witnesseth. Her kiss was like an adder's fang, as sweet as Lilith had, and her red-eyed vassals howled for blood in that city of the mad. And I have slain a vampire shape that drained a black king white, and I have roamed through grisly hills where dead men walked at night. And I have seen heads fall like fruit in the slaver's barracoon, and I have seen winged demons fly, all naked in the moon. My feet are weary of wandering, and age comes on apace. I fain would dwell in Devon now, forever in my place. The howling of the ocean pack came whistling down the gale, and Solomon Kane threw up his head like a hound that sniffs a trail. Down the wind like a running pack, the hounds of the ocean bayed, and Solomon Kane rose up again and girt his Spanish blade. In his strange cold eyes a vagrant gleam grew wayward, blind and bright, and Solomon put the people by and went into the night. A pale moon rode the wild white clouds, the waves on white crests flowed, when Solomon Kane went forth again, and no man knew his road. They glimpsed him etched against the moon, where clouds on hilltop thin, they heard an eerie echoed call that whistled down the wind. And that is Solomon Kane's Homecoming. It's always good to have an extra hand, isn't it? Okay, moving right along. One of my favorites coming up now. You know, there's nobody who can master the horror and darkness of this world like Edgar Allan Poe could. He could touch that darkness, and he could get you to touch that darkness too, definitely. Welcome, Cryptid Hunters. Glad to have you here. We're having a night of stories tonight. Loyal SWPA, good to have you along. Thank you. And moving on now to one of my favorite Poe tales, the Tale Heart. True, nervous, very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am, but why do you say that I'm mad? Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say exactly where it is that the idea first entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object there was none, passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me, he had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. One of his eyes resembled that of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold, and so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, thus to rid myself of the eye forever. Now, you who think me so mad will not think so longer when I describe the wise precautions that I took in my endeavor. The old man never suspected that every night at midnight I would look in upon him while he slept. I would put in my head very, very slowly into the room. I could see his shadow on the bed. And then I would put in a dark lantern, all closed so that no light shone out. And then I would open a very, very little crevice for light to come out. It was like the strand of a spider web, and it fell upon the vulture eye. But I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible to do the work. And then when morning would come, I would go boldly in his chamber, calling him by name and asking how he had passed the night. So he would have been a very profound old man indeed to suspect that every night, just at midnight, I looked in upon him while he slept. I was never more kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. On the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moved more quickly than did mine. Never before had I felt the extent of my powers. I almost chuckled. Slowly I opened the door, little by little by little. It took me a whole hour to place my head within the opening so far that I could see him as he lay upon the bed. I then put in the closed lantern, but my thumb slipped upon the thin fastening, and the old man sprang up to the bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I did not move a muscle. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle. I stood completely quiet. And in the meantime I did not hear him lie down. The old man could feel the presence of death in the room just as I could, like the death ticks in the wall. After waiting a long time, I decided to open the lantern. I opened a very, very little crevice in the lantern, and it fell as a ray into directly on the eye. Was open, wide, wide open, and I grew furious as I looked upon it. It stimulated me like the drum stimulates the soldier into courage. But for yet some minutes I refrained and kept still. And then I heard a sound that came to my ears, a soft sound, such as a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew what the sound was. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It grew louder and louder, and I thought the heart must burst. And now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor through the wall. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I ripped into the room. He screamed once only, and I dragged him off the bed to the floor with a heavy bedding over him. I held it there many minutes. Then a heart beat on with a muffled sound, but I felt secure it would not be heard through the wall. And if it ceased, I removed the bedding. The old man was dead. Yes, he was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If still you think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night went, and I worked hastily but in silence. First of all, I cut off the head, the arms, and the legs. I then took up 3 boards from the floor of the chamber and deposited all between the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no blood stain whatsoever. A tub had caught it all. When I had finished my labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark. It was midnight. And then there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to answer it with a light heart, for what had I to fear? Therein entered 3 men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused, and the officers, had been dispatched to search the premises. I bade them welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own. In a dream, the old man I mentioned was absent in the country. I took them all over the house. I showed him his treasures, safe and secure. At last I led them here to his bedroom, where the body was reposing beneath the boards. I had them all sit down, and in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, I placed my own seat above the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. My manner had convinced them they were singularly at ease, and while we sat, we chatted pleasantly, but ere long I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears. But still they sat, and still they chatted pleasantly, and the ringing became more distinct. But I tried to, ignore it. I kept talking, and we kept talking pleasantly, just mundane things. But the noise kept going louder and louder, and presently I found that it was not within my ears. It was a low, dull, quick sound, such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, yet the officers heard it not. I rose and started arguing about trifles with a heavy voice, dragging my feet across the boards, but the noise arose over all. It grew louder and louder, and still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God, no, no, no. They heard, they suspected, they knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. I felt that I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die, and again, hark! Louder, 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 louder! Villains, I shrieked. Dissemble no more. Admit to the deed. Tear up the planks here. It is the beating of his hideous heart. Amazing what a guilty conscience will do, isn't it? I didn't have a heart to get too loud. Okay. Anyway, that's one of my favorites. Perfect. It is one of the most perfect short stories ever written. Okay, and the symmetry, the way it's laid out, and you can't touch Poe with that. Definitely, that's good. Let's read some of the comments here for a minute. I'm in first row. I've been driving up. Okay, that's good. Let's see what we got here. I'm going to change mine. Sounds all 90s. Okay. Let's see. All right. Boy, the comments are moving fast tonight. Take me a while to keep up with them. I'm using a mouse now. I haven't used that in a long time. It's a little bit slow. That's that ticking you hear. It's not death ticks in the walls, okay? All right. I think my hand better than I can with the mouse on this because they are moving very fast tonight, definitely. Oh, the Cryptid, thank you, my friend. Okay, moving right along now. Because time is wasting. Some more storytelling. That is a story of madness and murder. Okay, let's now turn to madness itself. Okay, The Haunted Palace by Edgar Allan Poe. In the greenest of our valleys, by good angels tended, once a fair and stately palace Radiant palace reared its head, and monarch sought dominion. It stood there, never severs but opinion, over fabric half so fair. Banners yellow, glorious, golden, on its roof did float and flow. All this was in the olden time, long ago, and every gentle air that dallied in that sweet day along the ramparts plumed and pallid, a winged odor went away. And travelers within that valley two luminous windows saw spirits moving musically to a lute's well-tuned law. And round this baldest throne was sitting Paphiagene, and glory well befitting the ruler of the realm was seen. And all in pearl and ruby glowing was the fair palace door, through which came flowing, 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 and sparkling evermore, a troop of echoes whose sweet duty was but to sing, in voices of surpassing beauty, the wit and wisdom of their king. But evil things in robes of sorrow assail the monarch's high estate. Ah, let us mourn, for never morrow shall dawn upon him desolate. And round about his home the glory that blushed and bloomed is but a dim remembered story of the old time entombed. And wanderers now within that valley through red-litten windows see vast forms that move fantastically to a discordant melody, while like a ghastly rapid river through the pale door a hideous throng rush out forever and laughed, but smile no more. That is the perfect contemplation of madness. The pearl and ruby, that's the mouth, the windows are the eyes. Think about it. That's great stuff. Poe could do it, definitely. Without a doubt. All right, coming up now, we have another one of my favorite short stories of Edgar Allan Poe. The Cask of Amontillado, a perfect story of revenge and murder. Okay? The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best I could. But when he ventured upon insults, I vowed revenge. You so well know the nature of my soul. Will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length I would be avenged. That was the point definitely settled. But I continued to smile in his face as was my wont, and he did not now perceive that my smile was at the thought of his immolation. He had a weak point, this Fortunato, although in some aspects he was rather respected and to be feared, but he prided himself on his connoisseurship in wine. I often bought some of the Italian vintages myself whenever I could. I had everything planned out perfectly. I accosted my friend. It was during the height of the carnival season and the masquerade parade. I met my friend Fortunato. He was dressed in the party stripe of a jester. He had the conical hat with the bells on it. I thought I should never stop wringing his hand. My dear Fortunato, how luckily you're met. I was on my way to find Lucchese, and I have purchased what goes for a pipe of Amontillado, but I have my doubts, and I was going to get him to check it out. Lucchese cannot tell Amontillado from sherry. That's true, and some say, though, that his taste is a match for your own. Oh, no, my friend, come. My friend was drinking very heavily. Oh, no, my friend, come. Let us go to your palazzo. I will check this out for you. So he took my arm, and I put my cape around myself and put my black mask on, and we proceeded to my house. I had given all of the servants the night off. Everything was going according to plan. Fortunato took my arm, and we, although he's very unsteady because he was very drunk, he led me to the basement of the house, down into the catacombs where resided the many bones of my family, the Montresors. We went through the catacombs until we got to the very end of the room itself, where one portion against the wall, some of the bones had been thrown down. There was a niche in the wall. Herein, I said, proceed. Here is the Amontillado. My friend walked into the niche, and finding himself arrested, stood stupidly bewildered. In the niche were two staples, iron staples in the wall, from which there were chains and locks hanging. It was but the work of a moment to put the locks and chains around his wrists and waist. He was completely secured. I stepped back from the niche and said, Fortunato, feel the walls around you. We are 100 feet deep in the earth. The only thing here is the mold that hangs from the walls and the moisture that trickles among the bones. Come, let us go. Oh, well, I will leave. But before I leave, Fortunato, I will render you all the little necessities. The Amontillado, my friend said. Yes, I said, the Amontillado. I then uncovered a portion of mortar and building stone from among the bones, and with the aid of my trowel, I began to vigorously wall up the opening of the niche. I lay the second, third, fourth, fifth, and finally the sixth tier was on a level with my breast. I sat down for a while among the bones and relaxed. After resting, I got back up, and I could hear the jingling bells on his cap moving. I think his drunkenness was wearing off a little bit. Definitely. I then resumed the trowel and laid a few more tiers before I rested again. And finally, there was a fierce vibration of the chains from out of the niche. I got up. It was almost now midnight, and my task was drawing to a close. I laid the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th tier. There remained but one stone to be fitted and plastered into place. I then heard from out of the niche a low laugh that erected the hairs on the back of my neck. I had difficulty in recognizing it as that of the noble Fortunato. It seems that his drunkenness had worn off a great measure. The laugh said, a very excellent jest, a very good joke indeed. We will have many a rich laugh about it at the palazzo over our wine. The Amontillado, I said. Yes, the Amontillado. But is it not getting late? Will not the others be awaiting us at the palazzo, the Lady Fortunato and the rest? Let us be gone. Yes, I said. Fortunato, let us be gone. For the love of God, Montresor! Yes, I said. For the love of God, Fortunato. But to these words I hearkened in vain for a reply. I called aloud, Fortunato? No answer. I called again, Fortunato? No answer still. I thrust a torch through the remaining aperture and let it fall within. There came forth in reply only a jingling of the bells. My heart grew sick on account of the dampness of the catacombs. I hastened to make an end of my labors. I forced the last stone into its position. I plastered it up. Against the new masonry, I re-erected the old rampart of bones. For the half of a century, no mortal has disturbed them in Bazar Requiescat. Rest in peace. An excellent story, definitely. The Cask of Amontillado. Well, that brings us to one of my all-time favorite Poe things, okay? And I hope you're enjoying all this right now. Like I said, he has some very dark stories and a dark way of looking at things. But I've always admired Poe because he had such command over the language, without a doubt, and he could put so much of a visual ideal in your mind with just his words. He, as a man, was a phenomenal talent, without a doubt. So now we leave revenge and madness to horror, death, and sorrow, impersonalized by The Raven. I hope you like this. It's one of my favorites. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping as if someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some late evening visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. "That is it, and nothing more." Ah, distinctly I remember, for within the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for that fair and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here forevermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now to still the beating of my heart I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. Some late evening visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. That is it, and nothing more." Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "oh madam, truly your forgiveness I implore. But the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more." Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. For the silence was unbroken, and the darkness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word Lenore. This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word Lenore. And this, nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon again I heard another tapping, something louder than before. "Surely," said I, "well, surely what it is at my window lattice. Let me see then what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, this mystery to explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more." Open then I flung the shutter, when with many a flirt and flutter in there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, nor instant stopped or stayed, but with mien of lord or lady perched above my chamber door, perched upon the bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. "Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou," I said, "art sure no craven, ghastly, grim, and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on this night's Plutonian shore." Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." Then this ebony bird, beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the continents at war, "Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou," I said, "art sure no craven, ghastly, grim, and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. So straight I wheeled to cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door, and upon the velvet sinking I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant to croaking. Nevermore. Then methinks the air grew denser, perfumed by an unseen censer, swung by Sephram whose footfalls tinkled on the turfed floor. "Wretch," I cried, "thy God hath lent thee, by these angels he hath sent thee, respite, respite, and nepenthe from these memories of Lenore. Quaff, oh, quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore." Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." By that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore, tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aidenn it should clasp a sainted maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Clasp a fair and radiant maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." Be that word a sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked upstarting. Get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart. Take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow upon the floor. And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. Ah, yes, he could do that. I would love to have been able to have been there and hear him recite that. He used to recite that for groups of ladies. That it was a very famous poem of his in his time. I would love to have heard him recite that, without a doubt. Well, next up, I consider to be Poe's most haunting poem of all, and I've actually been to the city where he supposedly wrote this. And this was actually the last poem he ever wrote. It was published posthumously, but I consider it to be one of his best, and it is a very haunting piece. Annabel Lee. 'Twas many and many a year ago, in a kingdom by the sea, there lived a maiden whom you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden she lived with no other thought but to love and be loved by me. I was a child, and she was a child, in this kingdom by the sea. But we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee, with a love that the winged seraph of heaven coveted her and me. And that was the reason, as all men know, in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind blew out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my beautiful Annabel Lee, till that her high-born kinsman came and bore her away from me, to shut her up in a sepulchre in his kingdom by the sea. The angels not half so happy in heaven when envying her and me, and yes, that was the reason, as all men know, in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind blew out of the cloud one night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love was stronger by far than the love of many who were older than we, of many far wiser than we, and neither the angels in heaven above nor the demons down under the sea will ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And the stars never rise, but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so, by all the night tide, I will lie down by the side of my darling, my life, and my bride, there in that sepulchre by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea. Definitely very haunting. One of his best. And as I said, the last one I think he possibly ever wrote. Annabel Lee. You know, it's an interesting thing. Let me check some of the comments there. Okay. Let's see what we got. There's many short stories. You haven't missed anything. We just start the Raven. Okay, I'm coming. Catch it up now. Okay. I had, it's interesting how writers can have a connection. I know we have all at one time or another, we've read something that somebody wrote. If you read books or magazines, whatever, it touches you. It actually reaches out, perhaps even across centuries, from people you never knew or never met or could know, that actually touch your soul. That happened with me, with Poe, with this following poem. He sort of found out exactly where I lived. He touched me with this, and it's one of my favorites. I hope you enjoyed. From childhood's hour, I have not been, as others were, I have not seen, as others saw, I could not bring my passions from a common spring. From the same source I have not taken, my sorrow I could not awaken, my heart to joy at the same tone, and all I loved alone. But in my childhood, in the dawn of a most stormy life was drawn from every depth of good and ill, the mystery which binds me still. from the torrent of the fountain, from the red cliff of the mountain, from the sun that round me rolled in this autumn tint of gold, from the lightning in the sky as it passed me flying by, from the thunder and the storm and the cloud that took the form when the rest of heaven was blue of a demon in my view. That's Childhood Hour. That's a good one, definitely. That really, really touched me in a special way. That's one of my favorites, definitely. Another one of my favorites, and I'm going to recite it right quick, is another one that I have a penchant for. Gaily belied a gallant knight, in sunshine and in shadow, had journeyed along, singing a song in search of El Dorado. But he grew old, this knight so bold, and over his heart a shadow fell as he found no spot of ground that looked like El Dorado. And as his strength failed him at length, he met a pilgrim shadow. Shadow, said he, where can it be? This land called El Dorado. Over the mountains of the moon, down the valley of the shadow. Ride, boldly ride, the shade replied, if you seek for El Dorado. As I've gotten older, I appreciate that one a whole lot more, definitely. But I've got one more pose for you tonight. And since we've talked about madness, murder, revenge, death, sorrow, there's one more thing Poe was obsessed with, I think. Time. And listen to the last stanza of this. I stand amid the roar of a surf-tormented shore, and I hold within my hand grains of the golden sand. How few, yet how they creep through my fingers to the deep, while I weep. Oh God, can I not grasp them with a tighter clasp? Oh God, can I not save one from the pitiless wave? Is all that we see or seem but a dream within a dream? I like to think, in a strange way, Poe was probably talking about the Matrix we've heard so much about. Maybe? Okay. That sounds interesting in that respect, definitely. All right. Let me give you one more for Poe. I forgot I got one more left. And this ties into Halloween. Okay. This is a stanza from one of. Thus I pacified Psyche and kissed her, and conquered her gloom, and conquered her scruples and gloom. And we passed to the end of a vista, but were stopped by the door of a tomb, by the door of a legend tomb. And I said, what is written, sweet sister, on the door of this legend tomb? And she replied, Ulalume, Ulalume, it is the vault of thy lost Ulalume. And my heart it grew ashen and sober as the leaves that were crisped and sere, as the leaves that were withering and sere. And I cried, it was surely October, on this very night of last year, that I journeyed down here, that I brought a dread burden down here, on this night of all nights of the year. Ah, what demon has tempted me here? Well, I now know this dank tarn of Auber, this misty mid-region of Weir. Well, I know now this dim lake of Auber, this ghoul-haunted woodland of Weir. Perfect poem for Halloween, definitely. The ghoul-haunted woodland of Weir. I hope you've enjoyed our storytelling tonight. And like I say, it's always good to have extra hand when you do this stuff. Get over there. Okay, stay over there. Don't be walking around anymore. But I hope you enjoyed it. Let's check on some of our comments here. These are a lot of the things, actually, I've actually done a show on Poe. I called it, an evening with Poe. Edgar Allan Poe, where I would do a lot of his works. I've memorized a lot more besides these. He did some fantastic work. I love the short stories and the poems, and like I say, I love a story poem. It tells a story. It gives you a setting. It takes you some other place outside of yourself, even if it might be about murder and revenge, whatever the case might be. It's very interesting. Let's see, I've got my cape on tonight. I'm in a very Poe mood, a very big Poish mood there, and um, that's my Dracula cape, but I'm not going to bite anybody tonight, okay? Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed it. I just wanted to give you a little something different, kind of off topic from what we usually do there. And get you in the mood for Halloween. It's coming up. It's going to be about 6 more days. We're deep in the season of the witch. Halloween season has begun, definitely. And, the interesting thing about Halloween is when that veil gets thinner and the worlds of the living and the dead can cross over each other. It's an interesting time of the year. There are other times of the year like this, but nothing like Halloween, or Samhain, as the Celtics call it. The festival of Samhain, which was actually their New Year's Eve, by the way. It was the dying time of the year. It was the darkest nights of the year, and the darkness reigned over the world until spring came back around again. I'm very happy to see it because, hey, if you weren't, ready for winter, if you didn't prepare yourself for what was coming, you might not make it through winter. It might be your last winter that you know. So it's very important to try to make it through and be ready for the spring. It would bring life back to you and to the world again. And that was that's the way they looked at it, definitely, without a doubt. Well, it's time for the old storyteller to hang it up, okay? Until next time we'll get together. And please subscribe to Hunting the Shadows. And like I say, we're going to hunt the shadows together. This is your podcast too, okay? And definitely, I want you to look upon it that way and get your friends to subscribe. You subscribe, like, share us out. Tell people if you like Hunting the Shadows, you got to check this out, okay? And we're going to be talking some more. Now, next week, I'm going to be doing the next episode of the Hunting the Shadows. It's going to be about a very, very dark subject, black magic. Black magic is alive and well, more than has ever been in this world. In the modern times, it is definitely growing, without a doubt. And so we're going to be talking about that next week, definitely. And so I'm going to leave you with one more, if you can stand it, one more poem. This is one that I wrote for the season, and it's called All Hallows Eve. There's a pale witch's moon rising high among the shrouds of a clouded sky. Scarecrows dance in a Halloween wind, and this night may come to no good end. For there are things of evil out and about that can put the strangest of shadows to rout. And who knows what you just might meet deep in the darkness out on the street. When the jack-o'-lanterns have gone out at last, it'll be tricks when the time for treats is past. So head for home and do take care, for this is All Hallows Eve, so beware. Beware. Until we meet again then, my friends, stay safe, stay aware, and stay with us when you can, okay? And join us again. And we'll be looking forward to it. And until then, carpe noctem, seize the night, and embrace the mystery. Hunting the Shadows.